we have to invest in CEOs that can tell their story successfully. Like that, let's not worry about like the margins. Let's focus on their ability to tell the story, because that's going to draw all those other constituents in.
Hey everyone, it's Arick Wierson here with Leverage Storytelling, brought to you by Tunheim. I'm here with the legendary Gene Munster. Gene, thanks for coming on the show.
Awesome to be here, Arick.
Gene, this show is all about storytelling. You know, we look at people who are great storytellers, whether they're politicians or they're entrepreneurs, even cooks, and how they tell their story through their food. I mean, everything is game on this show. Talk to me about your story first.
So I'm 53, but I grew up in Minneapolis. I'm the youngest of four boys. My dad is an accountant. My mom's stay-at-home mom. Had a great childhood growing up. And my claim to fame is at age 11, I started a lawn mowing service. And it started out as ambition to get 5-10 lawns to get a little bit of scratch, and ended up becoming an empire. And by the time I graduated from college, we were doing about 120 lawns a year, and went to St. Thomas for my undergrad, and had this great side hustle with this.
It's
lawn
too bad
business.
you're in Minnesota, because if you've been in Florida or Texas, it would have been $1 billion business.
Yeah, we probably would have a great valuation on it. And I remember when I graduated, I was just so heads down, graduated with entrepreneurship and finance, and I was just so heads down, I wasn't even thinking about what I was going to do after. And I remember talking to my dad at my senior year and thinking, like, what am I going to do next? And I think I cleared like 70 grand. This is in 1994. And my pop's telling me, like, you have to understand, like, you want to take a step forward, you have to take a step back on how much dough you make. And so had a huge opportunity of joining Piper in 1995, because I mowed for a year after college. And from Haney Nada, who is just an incredible person to learn the business from, of tech, total visionary. For those of you who don't know Haney, he was one of the people that called the internet as a sell-side analyst, and then he went on to starting GGV, which was an early investor in all the big China companies, Alibaba, and I mean, the list of venture outcomes he's had is long.
So you joined Piper in 1995,
right.
And then when was the big call, the big call that put Gene Munster on the map?
So the big call was in 2004, I think, somewhere around there. But essentially, for Christmas, I got an iPod, and I didn't have a Mac. And that was a problem back in the day, because you couldn't run iTunes on a PC. And so I would have to go to the post-production room. There were a couple of post-production people at Piper. I would go there at night, and I would have to rip my CDs onto their Macs, because they had Macs, and I couldn't hook up my iPod to get the music on it. And I remember I'd set my watch, and it took like 30 minutes to rip each CD. And so I would sleep, and I thought, this is ridiculous. I got to go out and buy a Mac. And so,
by the way, just so you know, anyone who's Gen Z listening to this has absolutely no idea what you're talking about. But anyway, continue.
So I went out and bought a Mac, and came back to the office and talked to I was covering tech at the time, and I really wanted to cover Apple, and I kind of saw this opportunity for Apple to really break out from being a computer maker to being a mobile device maker. And so that was kind of the aha moment, as I was setting my alarm and ripping these DVDs in the post-production. Like, you need to have this halo effect between iPods and that Mac business. And so, one of my associates famously coined the term the halo effect when it came to Apple, that they're going to benefit from the Mac business, from the iPod. And that was the big start. But when we made that call, it's fun to think back at it, but at the time, most analysts were really shamed after the dot-com boom, and they were not motivated. Our directors of research did not motivate us to have price targets that were significantly higher than where the stocks were, because a few years before, that's what analysts did. They put these huge price targets out, and then the stocks never met that, and then it discredited the firm. And so I was the first analyst to break that after the dot-com. And so at the time, I think Apple was like a $45 or something like that. There's many splits ago, and I came out with a $100 price target, and that just caught people like,
which was going to make it the world's most valuable company, right?
At that time, it was the $100 price target would make it. This is back in 2004. That would make it like it would have been like a $10 billion company. It wasn't, but a lot of people didn't think Apple was going to survive at that point. And the fact to go out with a big call like that, where you're well above the where the stock was at, really put the firm at risk. And I remember we have a pre-meeting before we go into our morning research meeting with the director of sales. And I remember him pulling me aside and saying, you better get this one right, because if you don't, you're going to be looking for a job. And because his salespeople had to go out and make the call. And so it's been a great ride, but that's how it got started.
So basically, you're the guy that saw the future for Apple basically before anyone else, including your peers on Wall Street, right?
Well, I think I would say that my team. It was a team effort, but we got it right with, I think, the iPod and then we were able to, as each step kind of progressed. We didn't see like the App Store with the iPhone back in 2004, but we saw them as being a mobile device company, and we were able to kind of, each time they got to one mountain, we were able to figure out what the next mountain was to go to. So I would kind of think of it more as, and my vision wasn't where we are today, but I think each step of the way we were comfortably ahead of where people were at.
Now fast forward, a bunch of years, and now you've got your own asset management firm, Deepwater, right? You're one of the founding partners, and you're a regular on CNBC, on Bloomberg, on all the financial media, talking basically about the Magnificent Seven and the general tech industry, right?
Right. Yeah. So it's up to us to kind of stay relevant and to be in front of these companies. And part of it is the relevant piece is that, to understand, to invest, because we invest both in private companies, so all the way from seed up to late stage private companies like an XAI, or invested across that spectrum, and also public companies. But to understand, to make those investments, you really have to understand what the biggest companies are doing, because they're just so influential, and they can make or break a lot of these businesses that are much smaller. And so we've continued to do that, continued to stay relevant and engage, because ultimately it helps inform our investment decisions. That's what's most important, just across what we're doing. And so, yes, we're been active on those companies, and it's been really fun, especially in the last 2 years, just as tech has kind of taken this next shift forward.
Now, as we look at the Magnificent Seven and some of these other private companies that are coming up, the OpenAIs of the world and so on and so forth, talk to me about these CEOs, these visionary CEOs as storytellers. Talk to me about the importance of being able to really convey your story, not only to the marketplace or to investors if they're still private, but also to employees, to partners. What is your experience? You're obviously someone who's sort of combing through lots of different data, kind of reading the tea leaves, trying to see where some of the markets are going to be moving. What are you looking for when you're looking at a CEO as a storyteller?
Well, it's probably the most underappreciated part. I think that very few people can put their finger on that. Like, is this CEO, can they communicate their story? I think very few people can do that. They think about the management side of it. But I think that most successful companies, their CEOs just crush it when it comes to telling their story. And how we think about it is it's critical, because it's not just about understanding what the company is going to become potentially in the future for like investors to understand where this company could go, like what's the next stage of growth and what could the earnings be like. I mean, that's part of the storytelling. But also, when a CEO is successful at storytelling, they're telling stories to many different groups. And one of the groups is the investor piece. The other is that same story has to resonate with potential employees and gaining talent, and has to resonate with vendors and suppliers who want to extend credit to these companies and to commit resources to them. And so the superpower of storytelling is critical. And that was like when Apple, that was the big, for me, when Tim Cook came over, and have off the charts respect for Tim Cook, but he wasn't a storyteller when he joined. But the ultimate storyteller was Steve Jobs. I mean, This guy would have people would go and he would talk. It was just him. He would talk for an hour and 45 minutes and just have people mesmerized. And his ability, when things would break on his live performances, his ability to come up with a story about something him and Woz did back in the day to keep people kind of entertained and off the fact that the demo just broke while they're fixing the demo. Like, he was the storyteller of all storytellers. And I think that, like, what I saw just observing him and my limited interactions with him really underscored like the critical superpowers. Just in a meeting yesterday, and I was frustrated at kind of one of the pitches we were hearing, and I came back to the meeting and I said, we have to invest in CEOs that can tell their stories successfully. Like that, let's not worry about like the margins. Let's focus on their ability to tell the story, because that's going to draw all those other constituents in, whether it's employees or other investors down the road or suppliers, all that stuff. So it's critical.
Do you often find that there's a company that's got a great idea, great market fit, great technology, the patents they need to protect that technology, but the storytelling piece isn't there? And if that's the case, it's obviously very tempting, but as you said, it's such a key component. Do you help the CEOs get better at that, or what does that process look like?
Well, unfortunately, we don't help them. We offer to, but it's rare that they take us up on it. And because when you're interviewing, we'll look at about 2,000 private companies a year, and usually it's a 20-minute call initially, and so you really isn't a ton of feedback on the other side of it. But ultimately is that
but once they become part of your portfolio, for example.
Oh, a portfolio company, definitely. I mean, that's one of the big values that I think we bring to some of these companies. A lot of these companies, the founders, I mean, we've invested in founders 19 years old, and I'd probably say the average founder's age is 30 years old. And so they're still learning, as I am too. But so I think that, yes, that is a huge part of just understanding, like something unique that Deepwater brings to these companies is the ability we know what the language is that investors want to hear and how tight that should be and what the pressure points are that they want to hear. And so we spend a lot of time with those companies and help them just fine tune their message, at least to other investors.
Let's talk about some well-known CEOs, and I want you to grade them as far as their storytelling.
Okay.
Let's start with Sam Altman, OpenAI.
We'll go through a scale of 1 to 10. We'll do a 1 to 10, 10 being the best.
Okay.
I think he is a 7, and I think he does he's considered kind of the godfather of AI, but I think he's a little bit too pragmatic in the sense that he I think just doesn't have some of the energy that some of the other people we'll probably talk about. So I think he does a good job of hitting the pressure point when, like, for example, people are concerned about where AI is and how far along we are, and he'll just come out and say, just remember, like, we can't keep up with demand. We're getting outages from our system. That's part of telling the story. So, but, there's also been some complications about, just him and his management team that I think has made it hard for him to tell a really clear story.
Mark Zuckerberg.
Zuckerberg's getting better. I'd put him at an 8.
Where was he when he first came on the national scene?
A 2, maybe. It was. I think even gotten better over since their year of efficiency a couple years ago. Just at being clear, I think when he struggled. I'll tell you a low point. It was probably. He was probably a 5 when he was talking. They were focused on the metaverse. And I remember there was famously an earnings call, and the last question is, why should we believe in the metaverse? And he just couldn't communicate it. And after the next call after that, they started to shift their message towards AI. And so I think he's done a good job of that.
All right, we could go through the list, but I got to ask the one that everyone's talking about. You know who I'm talking about, Elon Musk. Storyteller?
Elon's he's a 10 out of 10. And I recognize that he's a polarizing figure, and I want to look at this objectively, is that if you look at what Tesla's stock is doing and look at the fact that it trades right now at close to 80 to 100 times this year's earnings, that's a sign of a company. For those of you who aren't looking at earnings, that's a metric in terms of how we think about valuation. The lower that number, the cheaper the stock is. That higher that number,
it's
the more
not typical for an automotive maker, right?
Not typical. The 80 multiple or 100 multiple usually compares to most stocks trade around 20 or 25, something like that. And I think that his ability to, in the midst of chaos, to be able to focus people on the long term is, he is at the highest list. There's a couple that are close to that, but Elon really wrote the book in terms of storytelling. And he's done it for a decade.
So, Gene, a lot of the people that watch this, I hope that everyone watches this, everyone from firefighters to Elon Musk himself, but really the most people that are watching this are people that are in the communications business. Journalists, reporters, PR professionals, crisis management people, politicians, those types of people. AI is proving to be such a disruptor in so many facets of life, but particularly when it comes to communications, it's just upending the playing field. I'd love to give you the floor and kind of reflect upon some of these changes that are happening when it comes to the communications business. people are ultimately worried about, are they going to be replaced? Are we going to be reading all AI generated stories 5 years from now? What do you say about the dynamic that we're seeing right in full in front of us?
Maybe just for starters, before we talk about the communication side, just talk about the underlying trend of AI. And Deepwater, we believe that the substance is going to exceed the hype. And there's a lot of hype around AI, which is a pretty bold statement. We also believe that we're going to reach in the markets this just spectacular run still in the next few years. It's going to end in a bursting of a bubble, similar to what we saw 25 years ago. And so from a background, like, this is real. What's going on with AI is real. And so when we focus more on just on what's going on with communications, I think at the most basic level is just the velocity of communications is increasing, and the cost of bringing those down is decreasing. And so this, of course, is just using generative AI to create copy for different things. And we're also seeing on the communication side, I think from our own, we used to have a full-time editor we publish a lot of written content, and now we don't have that. We use multiple LLMs to basically do that piece. But on top of that, and on the communication side, AI, the ability to target, I think is going to be much more advanced than any of the sort of the targeting means that have been used for the last 15 years. And so when you put that together on the communication side, the ability to build content faster and to get it out there more quickly, I think what you're going to see is just the addictiveness of content and communications, I think, is going to increase. And it's hard to break away from some of them now. And that's going to make it more difficult, I think, for new messages to get through, because I think people are going to get even more intense on that. And just kind of to keep this thought flowing through, is we think that AI ultimately is going to cause more tribalism. And that people, as they get comfortable in whatever their views are, the machines will just reinforce that even more. So from a communication standpoint, unfortunately, I think that's going to be probably one of the biggest detriments to humanity around AI, is just we're going to become more siloed.
And what do you think the communicators, whether they be on the corporate communication side or journalists, what can they do to sort of counter that, or at least delay that process?
Well, there is some good news here, is that, we talk about these tools, and there is something that ultimately humans really crave, that the machine AI won't take away. And those three things are creativity, community, and empathy. And creativity, community, and empathy. And creativity, you can debate, the machines can be creative, but there's something about creativity when it comes from another human that humans appreciate. I'll give you an example. Is through my travels to Japan, I've noticed these robotic pets, and they've never taken off. For years, the Japanese have been trying to get these robotic pets, but there's something about a heartbeat.
They're popular in Japan, though, right? But nowhere else, right?
Well, even marginally popular. But I will go and meet with companies out there who are trying to build a better robotic dog, but at the end of the day, there's
something about a heartbeat,
There's
right?
something about a heartbeat. And I think that when it comes to creativity, even though, like, if it was a song that was written that was used AI but inspired by something that like a reputable musician did, then I think people would be okay with it. But if it was just written by a machine, I don't believe that humans will embrace that. So I think that the creative piece, like, be true, like creative, that is like a protectable superpower around AI can't compromise. And separately on the community and empathy side, and like that is now when you're doing mass communications, I don't know how you get around this, but I just think, like, at a human level, as I've thought about how this changes, like, what would I do if I was 18 years old right now? Like, how would I be approaching my career? Yeah. And I think that I would be approaching it as someone who is focused on building relationships and being able to, like, listen and being empathetic. The machine, by definition, can bring people together, but just getting people in a room isn't what community is. Community is actually people connecting with each other.
I have a 20-year-old daughter who's in the Netherlands studying film school, or doing creative media, basically, and she really loves editing. But I keep on telling her that is in the creative array of things, that's going to be one of the first things that's going to be completely automated with AI, in my opinion. I've been encouraging her to, like, become more of a producer. Something, these intangibles, the creative plus sort of the organizational capabilities. Those are some of the things that I think that AI will eventually get there, but it's going to be a long ways away.
I think that's
giving
good.
good
Yeah,
advice?
it's good advice. Good advice. Yeah, you're doing the right
Watch
thing.
You heard it from the top.
It's I think just kind of embracing that the human to human piece, and whether it's somebody who's doing video editing or somebody who's doing some coding. The percentage of code obviously that's being written by machines is going up at fast pace. I think that there's a piece around. If I was going to kind of describe for communications people, like what's the persona you really want to kind of go for that cuts through the noise of AI, it's the person who's probably the life of the party. It's not necessarily the smartest person. It's the person who people are gravitated towards. If you'd have asked me 15 years ago, I'd have said, well, you want to be with the smartest person, the scientist, whatever that historical role is. But I think that kind of the shift here, because all that really advanced stuff, the machine's just going to do it. At Deepwater, we have an affiliate company that uses AI to pick stocks. And that's pretty unique because in theory, that could put our existing business at risk, some of that at risk. But we recognize that the machine's ability to think at a scale that the 10 of us can do is so. That's the piece I think for communicators is they know that. Be authentic and just make sure that the people you're trying to communicate with don't figure out that you're using these tools.
Good advice from Gene Munster. Thank you everyone for joining another episode of Leverage Storytelling presented by Tunheim. I'm Arick Wierson. We'll see you next time.